By February 1978, I was one of the most wanted men in America. My reign of terror that had started years earlier in the Northwest was coming to an end, and I knew it. The net was closing in. I had managed to escape from a jail cell in Colorado just a few weeks earlier, and make it all the way to Tallahassee, Florida. I probably could have started a new life for myself. But just a week after arriving in Tallahassee, I paid a visit to a female sorority house and unleashed absolute mayhem. 2 young women lost their lives at my hands that night. I guess old habits die hard. By the 12th of that month, I knew that it was time to leave Tallahassee. It was only a matter of time before detectives investigating my activities at the sorority house spoke with detectives out west and put 2 and 2 together. I managed to steal a Volkswagen Beetle, and I wasted no time in hitting the road and heading west. I had no real destination in mind, but I knew at the very least I had to get out of Florida. I wouldn't get very far, though. On the night of February 14th, I arrived in Mobile, Alabama. Mission accomplished, or so it seemed. By now, my bloodlust was insatiable. I had a constant need to kill, and so, rather than just continuing west, I turned the car around and headed back over state lines. I parked the car behind a restaurant and walked around Pensacola for a while, on the hunt, but I had no luck in finding a victim that night. Remember, the state of Florida was still reeling from my assault on the Key Omega house, and I suppose it's not inconceivable that women everywhere were being extra cautious. Not going out after dark, not walking alone. At around 1 a.m. I was pulling out of an empty parking lot behind the restaurant when I noticed a police cruiser pull up behind me. My heart sank in my chest. I just knew that I was going to be pulled over. When I saw the blue and red lights flash, I did my best to stay calm. I needed to think of an excuse as to what I was doing out so late. Why had I parked my car out of sight? Maybe I could turn on the old Bundy charm and tell the cop that I was an employee of the restaurant and had been working late. But in the end, the cop arrested me straight away. He'd run my plates and discovered that the Beetle was a stolen vehicle. He told me that I was under arrest. I must admit that I was pretty incredulous that the guy who arrested me didn't realize just who I was. I mean, he had absolutely no idea that I was the subject of a nationwide manhunt. But obviously, if I were to be arrested, then in all probability, my true identity would come to light. Reckoning that I had absolutely nothing whatsoever to lose, I kicked the cop's feet out from under him and ran as fast as I could. The cop took off after me, screaming at me to stop. His pleas fell on deaf ears. Florida is a death penalty state, and I knew that I was literally running for my life. Even when the cop fired 2 warning shots, I still didn't stop. Eventually, the cop caught up with me and tackled me to the ground. I wasn't about to go down without a fight, though. I knew that if I wanted to get away, I had to get the cop's gun. This cop was no pushover, though. He managed to get the cuffs on me, and with that, I knew that I was finished. I was put in the back of a squad car and told the cop that I'd have much preferred if he had just killed me. When we arrived at the local jail, I gave a fake name. For 2 full days, I refused to give up my real name, but I knew that I couldn't keep up the ruse indefinitely. My name is Theodore Robert Bundy, I told the Pensacola police chief. Even then, he still didn't know who the heck I was. Naturally, when detectives investigating the Key Omega killings learned that I was in Tallahassee on the relevant date, I became suspect number 1. At my trial, I decided to act in my own defense. Not the smartest of moves, I must confess. Shortly before the trial started, prosecutors offered me a deal. In exchange for a guilty plea on my part, they would spare me the death penalty and I would instead receive a 75-year prison sentence. It was a tempting offer. But in the end, the idea of standing before the world and admitting that I was indeed a monster was too much for me. I took my chances and pleaded not guilty. I reckoned that most of the evidence against me was pretty circumstantial. Prosecutors called to the stand a young woman who had supposedly seen me leaving the Key Omega house with the murder weapon, a large log, in my hand. But eyewitness testimony isn't always reliable. I mean, surely there was no way that a jury could send me to the electric chair based on the word of one eyewitness. As far as I was concerned, there was no actual physical evidence tying me to the crime scene at the sorority house. That would soon change, though. One night, I was in my jail cell when the sheriff and a few deputies paid me a visit. They told me that we were all going for a little trip. I insisted that they tell me just where it was they were bringing me, but the sheriff just said I'd find out soon enough. We drove to a nondescript building in town. The officers took me inside and led me up some stairs. At one point, I noticed some photographs lying on the ground, and for a moment I thought I had worked out why I had been brought here. My trial had caused a media frenzy. I was nothing short of a celebrity. I reckoned that the officers were planning on taking some photographs of me for the purpose of selling them to local news outlets and making a quick buck. When they brought me inside a room and I saw three guys in white medical coats standing next to a dentist's chair, I suddenly realized just why I had been brought to this place. I immediately demanded to see my lawyer, but the sheriff told me that he had secured a warrant to search my mouth, for crying out loud.